snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.
Hi guys! So I am here today to do a book review, and the book I'm going to be reviewing is Theatre of the Gods, which is by M. Sedaine. You guys probably heard me talk about this in the Try a Chapter tag, and because of that I decided to pick this one up. I actually read this as part of the Tome Topple readathon, so you might have seen it in my vlog. I adored this book. I thought I was going to, because the first chapter was so captivating that I really thought I was going to enjoy this, but I was pleasantly surprised by this. I have heard no one else talk about this, and yet it's fantastic. It is a truly fantastic book that I really sincerely believe should get a lot more recognition than it does. I would compare M. Sedaine to Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams, all the sort of weird but wonderful comedy writers, fantasy writers, sci-fi writers out there, because this is kind of a blend, I'd say more of science fiction than fantasy, but also comedy. There's a lot of comedy and satire within this that I really liked. I wouldn't say that it is as satirical as Terry Pratchett's work. I would say that he has that more than M. Sedaine, but I would say it's definitely a witty, a funny one. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Burton and Swinburne series by Mark Hodder, which is a steampunk series. This also has steampunk elements, so that may be why. But again, it's quite a witty, quite a funny one, and I would certainly recommend this. So what is this about? It's going to be a little bit hard to explain. Basically, we're following one major character who is being reported about. So we are essentially following the notes and the journey of this character via a researcher who has gone looking for this guy and has found out the story from him of what his life was, and this is what we're following, the adventure of his life. So the character whose life we're following is called M. Francisco Fabregas, and he is a philosopher, a heretical physicist, and perhaps the greatest human explorer in the world of all ages. He is quite a bizarre character. He completely believes that he has come up with a way to skip from one galaxy to another. He is very firm in his beliefs. He comes up with lots of very wacky inventions, and he's kind of a very eccentric character, to be honest, like quite an eccentric, quite a laughable character at times, but he's also quite sincere at times, and he's also quite thoughtful at times. He's just a bit eccentric too, so it's going to be an amusing read when you have an eccentric main character, that's for sure. Tor, on the very front of this, you can probably see, quote this as being a mad bastard of a book. I would agree with that, I think, because it is quite mad. There's no real rhythm or rhyme to the story of this. It's quite bizarre that the adventure these characters go on is kind of out of the blue, and there's not a whole lot of reasoning for it. It's more about the adventure itself. There are some very weird big groups who get involved behind the scenes, quite shadowy people being involved. There are also some very peculiar children who get involved, and generally there's a lot going on. As I said, in this book we're following the story that a writer is telling us. Immediately upon entering the story, we find out that the tale is being written from an abandoned moon in the middle of nowhere, and the only two people on this moon seem to be the writer who is writing this story and the man he's writing it about, which is M. Francisco Fabregas. The character of M. Francisco is completely mad, he's old, he's a bit senile, and generally his story and the way he recounts it is quite bizarre, so the writer has had quite a task in compiling all of the notes together from various sources and then from the actual source himself to come up with this book, and we do get some commentary throughout the story from the writer on what he's discovered and how very bizarre it is, which I liked because that's kind of like breaking the fourth wall essentially. I like that when that happens. This book is made up from various different scenes, so we have lots of adventure scenes where we're following M. Fabregas and the people he's with, the crew that he's with, who are journeying around the galaxy trying to skip into another one. And we're also getting small interludes throughout the story from the writer. We sometimes get backstory, so for example, if there's something going on and we don't really understand why, we might then have a chapter that goes into a backstory about why this might be relevant for the character, etc. So that's always interesting. One of the elements that I really enjoyed is if you skip to the very end of the book, but this is not a spoiler, don't worry, then you have this, which is the little page of calmness. And there are a couple of points throughout the text where it says, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling at all disturbed by the events that are taking place, just feel free to skip to the little page of calmness. And I'll tell you a little bit from the little page of calmness. I'll just read it out. Stay calm, breathe deeply, and relax. Picture yourself in a calm and relaxing place away from whatever it is that is making you tense. Find your space. The universe is mostly space, but it is often full, especially in the busy season. Picture yourself floating peacefully in a bath of soothing water. There are bubbles in this bath, perhaps. In any event, it is very soothing. Now imagine yourself floating out, away from your cares and worries, away from the struggles of everyday life, away from your house, your street, your neighbourhood. You are perfectly calm and surrounded by a ball of blue light. Focus on this light and let it surround your whole body. You are floating up above the earth, above the clouds. You are floating out into space, surrounded by this peaceful and not at all dreadful blue light. Now you find yourself floating through the heavens past stars and planets and comets. There is nothing here that can hurt you. You are totally relaxed. You float outward, past a nebula shaped like a happy kitten perhaps. Unless you are afraid of kittens. You should not be afraid of kittens. Of all creatures in the universe to be afraid of, the kitten should not be the main one. They cannot even hold a gun. Imagine a kitten trying to hold a gun in its tiny paws. Is that not adorable? It goes on for a while, but that kind of gives you a little insight into the tone of this book. So that's the little page of calmness, and I did flick to it about twice in the story, not because I was particularly stressed, but because it told me to. I just found it quite amusing to do that and follow the instructions of the author. To be honest with you, you're probably better off going into this book not knowing an awful lot about it, because that's how I went into it. And I think that that's what really captured my attention, was that it was so bizarre and odd. All you really need to know are some of the key things that I found interesting are M. Francisco Fabregas comes up with an invention of earphones, and these earphones are controlled so that they only let in pleasant noise, which means if you have like noisy neighbours outside, you've got someone mowing the grass at 4 a.m, you've got some noisy builders doing building work next door, anything like that, you put in your headphones and you cannot hear them. However, unlike normal headphones or noise cancelling headphones, if there is a pleasant noise, for example, you hear someone who is playing the piano a few streets away but it's being drowned out by the builders, you put in your headphones and all you will hear is the sound of the piano. So that's quite nice. It just sounds like a very convenient, ideal idea. So that sounds great. I would love a pair of those myself. The other thing that I liked a lot was that we had a kind of blend of machine and flesh people. So the people in this world are not all human. They are mostly some part machine. Most of them do not have a complete flesh body, and so anyone who is entirely made of flesh or is majority made of flesh is kind of weird in this world. Seeing the difference between the people who are flesh and the people who are part machine was an interesting contrast, and I do think it made some interesting debate points. It also had this sort of steampunk element, of course, because of that. At the very beginning of this book, we actually find a girl who is trapped within ice, and people believe that she's been there for a millennia, and so when they unfreeze her gradually, they do not believe she will still be alive, but of course she is, and not only is she alive, she's also quite incredible. So she gets involved in this story too. As I said, each of these things happens pretty early on in the book. You're told about them. They don't give anything to do with the plot away, but they're all quite bizarre and quite weird, so it gives you a feel for what this might be like. I definitely think it echoes Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams and Mark Hodder, like I said, so if you like any of those, you'll probably enjoy this too. I will say this has made me hugely excited to check out M. Sedane's other book, which is coming out in July. I don't think his second book is a continuation. This one's just a standalone, and it works as a standalone. Go and read this book, guys. It's really, really funny. It's very interesting. It's very bizarre. Very bizarre, but filled with imagination, and I love that, and I just think it's really witty and very funny and very amusing. So do leave me your thoughts if you guys have read this. I'd love to hear them. If you haven't read this and you're now super intrigued to do so and you're going to go buy it, then let me know that as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next review. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.